Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shay Douglas. I'm from the Earth Heroes TV network, and today I'm really excited to sit down, open up the conversation around health with Dennis O'Connor, tuning in from the Awakening in Health. I've recently got to really know Dennis on a personal level, and we've had the opportunity to connect and meet up as part of a men's group, and have shared some really nice morning ceremonies down at the beach, and really just dropping in to encourage one another to connect deeper to ourselves. And today we're going to open up the conversation around personal health and how to navigate our current times and challenges in the world around mental well-being. We're going to talk about also things that may arise, such as depression, anxiety, and also relate that to our environment and how we can ultimately connect more to ourselves. So I want to thank you, Dennis, for taking the time out, mate.
Pleasure. I'm excited.
Pleasure. This is really exciting because Dennis is someone who has a phenomenal experience, over 20 years working in professional healthcare industry. And so you've really got to see the insider viewpoint of it. And now you've chosen to leave the mainstream medical industry, and you're opening up to a whole new range of health ideas and health practices that hasn't necessarily been taught. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of.
Or what about if you introduce yourself and
Sure.
give us a little bit of background into how you've got here today in this moment?
Absolutely. So one of the kind of expressions I use a little bit is standing on the giants of shoulders.
Or standing on the shoulders of giants.
Standing on the shoulders of giants even.
Yeah.
And essentially, I kind of consider myself a little bit in the health industry as a jack of all trades, but I'm kind of fascinated by doing research into some of the things that I should know about.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start kind of digging into and a little bit behind some of the things that you get taught in the mainstream, I personally got quite shocked about the things that were being left out. So I started off in health more than 20 years ago in acute care nursing, so that's kind of serious stuff. Then I graduated into intensive care, which is, and I got to a pretty high level there, which is, turning off ventilators and doing CPR and doing all that kind of high level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got a little bit burned out, so I had to take a break I chose to take a break from nursing, should I say. And I did a few quite different things like scuba dive instructing and selling real estate for a little while. And that break was really important. And I found myself just getting back. It was in around the time of the housing crisis, and essentially working in real estate wasn't viable for me at that stage. So I decided to temporarily go back into nursing, which ended up being a little bit more than temporary. And I went into the direction of mental health. So I stayed in that area for about 3 or 4 years, and then went towards addiction treatment, and finally ended up in acute mental health, which is, I guess, treating the most serious of people in the community. And for having branched out in all those different areas, I had a bit of a sneaking suspicion when I got back into health that things maybe could have been working a little bit better. And taking my knowledge from general health towards mental health, and also my knowledge about, I guess, nature and the environment through doing things like scuba diving, I kind of got this more pressing feeling that we weren't doing things as well as we could. And the more I investigated some of those things I was suspicious about, the kind of, I guess, the deeper and the bigger a rabbit hole was that I fell down. And it's got, I guess, unfortunately, to the stage where I feel that I'm not really serving my fellow man by staying in mainstream mental health, or even mainstream medical treatment, because essentially there are many reasons why there is a focus on symptom treatment, and it's not a focus on getting people better. And I really think that mainstream medicine is missing the mark in a massive way by not having that focus, and I'm going to use this word, which is actually illegal, on cure of some diseases. And even little things like that, the fact that technically I am not allowed to say that some illnesses can be cured. There's so many little things that are broken in the system, and that's just one example.
Yeah, super interesting, man. I really love that you've committed your life to serving humanity ultimately, and it seems, just talking about here locally in Far North Queensland within Australia, we are faced with a huge issue of mental illness.
Absolutely.
And I feel grateful that there's organizations coming out of Melbourne that are looking to lots of different research and science around how nature can support us to overcome these mental challenges, particularly with different kinds of mushrooms and different, once illegal, but now slowly coming into the mainstream character. What would you suggest has been the biggest problem that we've faced with regards to mental health?
And I go off on tangents a little bit, so feel free to pull me back in if I go off on too far a tangent. But now I'm firmly of the mind that you cannot practice adequately as any type of health practitioner in mainstream medicine unless you know about the history of economics, bizarrely, and the history of medicine itself. And I never thought that was necessary to look at when I was actually practicing in the mainstream. And you'll find that the majority of health practitioners, doctors, nurses, never even consider that there are factors within those two other domains that affect us directly, okay? And again, I can kind of talk at length about some of that stuff and why it's relevant. And hopefully I'm not gonna be not making it too trivial by just mentioning the big problem involved. But the big problem involved is when you have massive industries that need to make profits, the profits come before people, okay? And the worst business model, and this was even in I think Forbes magazine about 5-6 years ago, but the worst model for a health system is to cure people. And the best model is to have people coming back continuously for the rest of their lives for treatment. And I am, I guess, around this stage, quite certain that this is one of the biggest problems in relation to how we're treating patients and clients, by having a dependency on the system and having repeated engagement with the system for the rest of people's lives. And my philosophy is that I want to see somebody as quickly as possible and as briefly as possible, and ideally in the first session, have them never coming back to me again. Sometimes that doesn't always work out. But then if there's a second session or a third session needed, my priority should be to make sure that they're given all the ingredients to be able to be successful without dependency on me or any other health professional for that matter. And you made a great point about some of these alternative common treatments, like I guess plant medicines, for one of a different term on that. And for a long time, those treatments and even investigating and looking at those treatments was illegal. And we have to ask ourselves why that was. And could it impact on the profits of other medications or treatments? The answer, I think, is possibly yes. And another massive bugbear of mine through, I guess, looking at things very deeply is this eternal focus of almost 90 or 95%. Obviously, I'm just kind of coming up with these figures, but I guess it's my perception is that this is quite close. This 95% focus on just what's happening inside your head when you're treating things like depression, anxiety, and addiction. And this is absolutely misleading and it's inaccurate. To my mind, you should have a 30% focus of what's here and a 30% focus of what's in the rest of your body and a 30% focus of what's external, the things that are attacking you from your environment. And it's just so many simple things that you would expect your doctors and your peers to know. And I've had these experiences where I've mentioned that serotonin, one of the most important chemicals that we know for happiness, is produced mostly in your stomach. Okay, and depending on what you read, that's either 85 to 95% of serotonin is produced in there. And I've had arguments with doctors who said, no, it's not, it's produced in your head. And they pull out a chair, jumped onto Google to prove me wrong, and they've gone, and these guys are working in the system, and they've said, wow, I never knew that. Now, when we've got people who are missing those key components of knowledge, we can't expect to get people better. So as part of advancing with any sort of mental health problem, you have to be absolutely on point with not putting poisons into your body through your stomach. So this for me has to be one of the primary focuses. And then obviously consideration about toxicity from the rest of our environment is right up there as well.
Yeah, awesome. So I really love what you shared there, because from what I'm hearing from you is that when we look at mental health, we've got to look at the whole aspect of the human being and their lifestyle choices that they're making to influence whether they're susceptible to these illnesses.
Absolutely.
And so obviously the food we eat, the environment we find ourselves in, the air we breathe, the water we drink, all of these fundamentals that we need to understand how important it is for us to operate. Is there any other, like obviously these are very physical based practices, that we're eating food or drinking water, physical things that we can see. Is there anything like, obviously, because it seems emotions are non-physical, right? Like emotion of sadness or grief or anxiety. Are there any practices that we can, really dive into deeply to be able to overcome these mental challenges of anxiety and depression?
Absolutely. I do run a few courses about this, and I'll kind of give you the cream of what I do. And it's quite incredible about how little I knew about this when I was kind of more involved in the mainstream part of mental health. But everybody's heard of this term called placebo. And I know this is right up your alley here, because I've seen some of your interviews with some people who I absolutely admire. I think that they're amazing people. So for anybody who's not aware, the placebo is this mechanism that is considered in mainstream medicine as an inconvenience. Okay, and mainstream medical people kind of have this idea that it messes up clinical trials. Okay, so again, I'm preaching to the converted here, but I say this for the benefit of anybody listening. Any new drug on the market has to be compared against a placebo. And we have all different types of placebos. We've got, for example, an injection has a more powerful placebo effect than a tablet. Surgical placebo has a more powerful effect than either of the two beforehand. So if you put a new tablet on the market, there's a rough percentage, and this is very rough, by which you kind of see a placebo effect, and it's sometimes stated as around that 30% mark. Okay, so essentially what that means is if I give you an inert substance like a sugar or salt and tell you that it can help or fix or cure something, there's a 30% chance that it might have an okay or a very good effect. Okay, there's actually Western medical literature that shows that the placebo effect has actually cured terminal diseases like cancer. The placebo effect is one of the most powerful and incredible and miraculous things that we actually have the capacity to unlock if we do the right thing. On the other side of the placebo, and this is something that almost you'll never hear people in medicine talk about, this is a thing called the nocebo effect. And nocebo, just from memory, I think it means I will harm. I could have that wrong, but it's something like this. Okay, and essentially there's many examples, but two that come to mind as very powerful are two different people who were diagnosed, I think in about the 80s and 90s with end-stage liver cancer. And I might get the time frames a little bit wrong, but essentially this is the kind of story. They were both given about 6 months to live. They died very specifically within that time frame, and on autopsy, both those people did not have liver cancer. Okay, so as dramatic as we have this placebo effect, we've got a nocebo effect, which can be just as destructive. And the more I look into this stuff, and this is the kind of stuff that people have to be aware of, as soon as you set your foot across the threshold of going into a doctor's surgery, you are getting a diagnosis. And a diagnosis, as far as I'm concerned, is another word for nocebo. Because if you get diagnosed, let's say your serotonin is messed up because you're eating McDonald's and your food intake is alcohol or whatever it is, and I'm a doctor who you really admire and respect, and I tell you that you've got a chronic condition called depression that you can never fix because depression is incurable, and you got to take this tablet for the rest of your life, I've sealed your fate. I've sealed your fate. So one of the huge messages that I'm always pushing very, very firmly is be very careful about accepting any sort of diagnosis. And you hear this kind of counter argument of people saying, oh my God, I'm so relieved. Finally, somebody gave me something. I now know what this is, what's going wrong. And I resist when I hear people say that, because all they're doing is getting comfort because they've got a rationale for something that's not going on, for something that's causing a problem, should I say. When in actual fact, invariably, they haven't addressed what's happening in their stomach, they haven't addressed what's happening psychologically, and they haven't addressed other toxicities. And I'm kind of getting back around to the original question you asked me, but the power of what you're putting into your mind and what you're expressing outwardly with your mind has absolutely immense significance in your ability to get yourself better or not, as the case may be. And I know of some of the content that you guys talk about in Earth Heroes and some of the people that you engage with, this idea of I guess almost tapping into what some people might call the ether or Gaia or this energy. There is massive significance in this. So things like active breathing techniques and meditations and introspection and gratitude and love and trying to, as you said, help your fellow man. These are the answers to just about all the problems in the world. So I kind of love engaging with you because you very much embody this I guess pro-human passion. And this is something that kind of floats my boat as well. I really get a kick out of that.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Thanks so much for sharing. There's so much going in my mind as you're speaking.
Sorry, I tend to take a long way.
I love it. I love it. And thanks very much. I love hanging out and spending time with you.
Yeah.
It's like we're both on the same level on the way that we think and how we want to live our lives and how we want to serve ultimately.
Yeah.
And that's part of the primary focus of doing these videos. So I'd love to invite you guys, if you're finding quality in this video, please like it, share it. Leave us a comment if you have any questions for Dennis or myself. We'd love to engage with you and hear from you. But bringing it back to your story, Dennis, I'm really curious how, in the timeline of things, you've kind of, and I'm curious in what the main catalyst was, because you've gone from working in the mainstream and being a part of it all, working in the hospital as a nurse, and then starting to realize, wow, is it when you were working in it that you realized something's not quite right here, and then you've gone on this journey afterwards to discover all of these hidden secrets that we haven't been told, and now starting to unlock them in your mind, and you're going out there and sharing that with the world, essentially.
Yeah, it was a very interesting journey, and there's so many parts that I could probably be here for 6 hours, but I don't want to bore everybody.
Is there a particular story that
listen,
really stands out?
there's a few, and they're kind of generic.
Yeah.
And the amount of times I heard from again, some of my peers who are working in the mental health area especially, and some of my colleagues who are very senior, and they would say stuff like, well, we know antidepressants don't work, but we have to try them. And statements like, well, we can't really do anything about it because the doctors prescribed it. I heard that kind of statement a lot. And then the other thing was, I used to get into trouble for trying to do things before we got to the stages of medication. Okay? And when you realize that you've got to be devious and actually step outside of what some people are trying to put onto some of your clients, and when you realize that if you essentially have to put a barrier up to more or less postpone the inevitable with some patients, and what you're doing has got incredible effects, something's wrong. And I'm going to say something now, but I don't want to say this based on ego or bragging. It's not about this. This is more a reflection on the system as opposed to me. And I had on numerous occasions people come back to me and say, after 20 years of depression, for example, I cured their depression. 20 years in the system. The amount of times I heard people say, I've been in this system 5, 6, 7 years. I've never heard one time anybody explain this to me. Like, I honestly can't count. And again, I used to always catch those people who said I cured their depression. I used to pull them up and say, well, in actual fact, I have not cured your depression. What I did was I supplied you information in a way that you understood, and I opened the door for you to be able to make the changes that cured your depression yourself. So I was always exceptionally, incredibly, I take note of that point, that this was not about me. So my job, I think, as a person who's involved in wellness is all about just giving people the ingredients and then unlocking the door for them to be able to progress with their health.
It's a really hopeful message that ultimately this illness or disease or mental struggle or depression is curable. It's so hopeful.
And is working in this industry, I've got to be careful about using that language.
Wow,
I've got to be careful about using that language. What I can say is that I have seen absolutely miraculous results with people who have made the necessary changes, which we talked about before, and they have stated that their chronic depression and anxiety has been cured. And you can take that however you want. You can say it as they're lying to me, or I'm lying to you, or it's just anecdotal. And this is my other massive frustration with the system is I can sit here, and I think you know me well enough now that I'm pretty genuine, but I can sit here and tell you numerous individuals, without breaking confidence obviously, that have had absolutely incredible results. And because that's anecdotal and that's never been done under a clinical type of setting or a peer-reviewed study hasn't been conducted, they're irrelevant.
Wow.
They are absolutely not included in the statistics. And we know that now chronic depression is incurable. And this is what your science magazines will tell you, your medical magazines will tell you.
Wow.
Chronic depression is, as we speak right now, incurable.
Wow. That's crazy.
Again, you're preaching to the converted here.
That's insane. And I mean, it just goes against life, essentially. All of life. And it's, I mean,
I can see you stunned, and so you should be. But I've gone through that.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, why have I got so much resistance amongst my peers when I'm doing stuff that works, and I'm getting into trouble. So that was my kind of the door open, and that's actually brings it nicely back to that question you asked me. So when you have challenges to what you're doing, you have to, and it might be researcher bias, but you have to dig deeper about what you're doing. So it's not good enough for me to say, well, I suggested this change and this worked and blah, blah, blah. So all of a sudden then you have to go, well, actually what we're doing is we're looking at serotonin, and we're looking at the fact that it's produced in the stomach, and then we're looking at the fact that sugar has this effect, and then we're also looking at things like blue light and cortisol stimuli. So you have to back up what you're saying with the science. And then you kind of have a bit of a dilemma, I guess, when you realize that I know all this kind of stuff about all these kind of things that affect what we're calling clinical depression and anxiety, and I'm almost having to try and pitch it and sell it, and I'm getting knocked back in relation to working in a mental health setting.
Wow.
So when you finally have enough of that, you kind of say, hey man, I'm sick of this. I'm taking what I know, which I have seen work firsthand, and I'm going to try and tell more people about this. Hence the genesis of what I'm doing now, which is called Awakening in Health, which is what I perceive as educate people to be able to take those steps.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. It's so inspiring to hear that you've really shifted course and realigned to a deeper purpose and understanding what it even means to be healthy as a human, and giving people the information that you've diligently done the research, done the work, you've worked in the industry, and come to the conclusions through evidence what is going to be beneficial for them to be able to transform their health in whatever way is necessary, whether it's depression or so on. So I'm curious, could you explain more about the Awakening in Health process and kind of what that looks like, and how you're working with people and getting this information and message out to people, being kind of on your own independently now?
Yeah, sure. So it's still a little bit of a work in progress, but I've got so one of the things that I used to do clinically and face-to-face was I'd kind of take people on a little bit of a journey almost. And initially I'd spend about 90 minutes with them, and that would be kind of broken up into a few different parts. And one of the parts that's really important when you've got somebody who's really distressed is I guess creating that rapport. And if you kind of launch in with what you're talking about, people can't listen. They're too unwell, their minds are kind of spinning. So you kind of have to go through this process where you're confirming that you're listening to somebody, and you use certain dialogue, and the dialogue is a little bit like this. So Shay, what you're saying is that you're really distressed, and you think the world hates you, and your family hates you, and you've tried to get success, but it's not happening for you. I understand. And you might have to repeat that 5, 6, 7 times, okay? So it's quite a laborious thing. And after a while, the person who's unwell kind of goes, hang on, I don't need to repeat this anymore. This person's listening to me. And once this person listens to it, the barriers start crumbling. They really start coming down. And only then can you start delivering information that makes sense to people. So if you take people on a journey about exactly how stress affects your body, and I've got a very strong foundation in this because of my work in intensive care, so I know about the effects of adrenaline, cortisol. And for example, anxiety is a really good case study. You've got people who are walking up to the emergency departments, and I'd love to, it'd be good to know a statistic on this, and I actually don't know, but many times people walk up to the emergency departments thinking they're having a heart attack, and they run all these tests, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with them apart from just having this massively racing heart and this fear and this inability to breathe properly, okay? And when you break down, to use that as an example, about how your body works, people just get relief that's almost instantaneous, okay? And I'll just break that down very quickly, hopefully we've got enough time. Essentially, we've been designed to either heal or to be in fight or flight mode. And you got two types of flight mode. You got a very acute one, which means an immediate one, and you got a soft one. And we don't have enough time to talk about the soft one just probably today. But the acute one is if a tiger jumped out in front of you, okay? And we've been designed to do something about that. So if a tiger is jumping out in front of you, you have to run. So your blood flow has to be in your big muscles in order to fight or flight. Now, and I ask this question as part of my treatment to everybody. If you have all this extra blood in your big muscles, where's it coming from? Because it's not like you have a container that you've got to fill all this blood up with. It's coming from somewhere else in your body. I'm interested. Do you know the answer to that?
I would guess your heart.
Nope. Your heart's a pump, so it goes
maybe
through
the extremities.
Very good.
Fingertips.
That's one place. There's another absolutely vital place.
Brain.
No, your brain doesn't have an extra little cache in there. It's filled up with all the other good stuff.
Your penis.
In my case, possibly. I like it. Your gut. Okay, so your gut's blood flow is massively decreased. And remember what we said before? Serotonin is produced in your gut. So if you're in a fight and flight mechanism, your serotonin factory is messed up. Okay? And then when you talk about what adrenaline specifically does, which is take blood from your extremities, it makes your heart go quicker, it makes you want to run, for example, then you can start explaining the symptoms to somebody. Okay, and when somebody has a panic attack, their heart rate goes up, boom, 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 boom. Their skin gets clammy, the hairs stand up, they might sweat, they get funny tinglings in the back of their neck, you know, their pupils change, their legs get restless, they get trembles, and all of a sudden you tell somebody that that is an adrenaline rush. They're like, oh my God, I thought I was dying. Okay, and then when you say that there's a very fine line, in fact, your body doesn't know the difference between excitement and anxiety. Your body doesn't know the difference. All you're doing is you're superimposing your thoughts on top of it. Sorry, I get quite animated because I talk about this. It's so important. Really okay. And when you suggest some techniques for people to be able to manage their now physiological response as opposed to this chronic anxiety condition, you can change somebody's life by taking 20 minutes to explain that to somebody. And I know I'd be absolutely privileged to do that.
Yeah, that's huge, man. What would your suggestion be if someone's going through that and they're having a rush of blood and everything's building up? What's the one thing that they can remember to be able to do? Connect with their breath. Maybe you mentioned something before.
Yeah, absolutely.
To shift that state. Yeah, if there was no tiger
if you can catch it in time, breath work is absolutely awesome. Okay, but my absolutely first and foremost, depending on your physical capabilities, is your body is screaming at you to run from a tiger. What do you think you should do?
Run.
Yes. High intensity exercise.
Nice.
High intensity exercise. If you can knock it, absolutely. 20 hard and fast push-ups. And if that doesn't work, do it again. Or run up and down the stairs.
And then essentially
your body
burning out the energy.
Absolutely. Yes. Your body is going, there's a tiger. I need to run. Absolutely. It is powerfully effective. And the other, there's a lot to that suggestion, by the way. It sounds very superficial, but the other thing that's happening when you're doing that is you're creating a different neural pathway. You're forming a different neuroplasticity. Beforehand, what you're doing is you've got a trigger of the start of anxiety that's telling you you're going to have the worst 20, 30 minutes of your life. That's going to be coming in 10 seconds. Whereas if you are then launching into, hey, this is my trigger for exercise, you're totally rewiring. And all of a sudden, as opposed to being terrified about the eventuality of anxiety, you are now going, holy shit, this is my 20 press-ups time. And after a while, your body sometimes goes, you know what? I don't feel like doing 30 press-ups. I might let this anxiety just die down a little bit here. So it's got profound effects. It's got profound effects. And I don't know why, where I was working, I'm the only person telling people that.
So essentially the short answer to anxiety and depression
Listen to your body.
Listen to your body. Become aware of your body and how it's responding.
Yeah.
And then go for a jog, go for a run, sprint it off.
Just about, absolutely.
Yeah,
and obviously there's some people who, and you get people who go, well, I'm in a wheelchair, or I'm doing this, or blah, 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 blah. And the thing that people don't remember is I'm not talking to the exceptions.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, that's another story. You know, why do we want to be talking about, you know, that one person who had, and then they, you know, we're talking about, you know, normal people.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love it. And just the way you explain it in so much depth and clarity around how the body works.
That's key.
And keeping it simple.
Yes.
Like the answers are accessible and they are simple.
Yeah.
It's just about being aware of the body and being aware of the solutions for it. So it's really love your explanation on that, man. That's so good. We've got a few people watching us. So, hey guys, if you're tuning in, send us a comment, leave us a question, or let us know actually where you're watching from. Yeah, and if you like this video, again, just hit a like and share. We've been talking for half an hour now, and I really would love to keep yarning if you got the time for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you really enjoyed this video, let us know, because we're happy and we would love to dive into all these branches of topics. Like we can already go deeper into the nervous system, go deeper into understanding the circulatory system, really understanding more about ourselves. It's so fascinating in today's day and age that we're seemingly, from my perspective, taught to learn about myself from what others tell me. Even when I was going through knee operations, you know, and I was going to see doctors to tell me that I'm sick or that I've got something wrong with me and I'm broken and all this stuff, and without realizing that it's my responsibility to go within to discover where the deeper healing needs to take place. And maybe you want to talk a little bit, just to wrap it up, around the powers or benefits of taking that journey to discover deeper levels of who am I.
You've hit on a few really interesting little points there, and this is another thing that I'm very, very passionate about. We seem to have this very deep and powerful message that our bodies are these big, and never more so in this current climate, that our bodies are these big bags of dirt, grime, and viruses that at any given time are just about to break down. And you need to get to your doctor, and you need to be checking for this and that and the other thing, or else you're going to die of X, Y, and Z. This is just this message that is so powerful, especially in the present day. And I think for me, to be a part of promoting that message, that couldn't be further from the truth. Your body is this incredible, supernatural almost mechanism of healing. And your body is always trying to tell you that something is not right. If you have a pain or an ache or some kind of condition, whether it's depression, anxiety, anything, this is your body trying to communicate with you. And if we listen to our bodies and then take action, then we can, I'm convinced, fix just about anything. Fix just about anything, whether that's a posture that's out of alignment, whether this is toxicity that we're putting into our bodies. I mean, there's a whole, the amount of amazing, excellent stuff that's out there that never seems to filter through to the mainstream. It, for me, is just quite incredible. You've got this whole area of circadian medicine. Our bodies, believe it or not, are designed to be working with the sun. So, you know, the kind of, when you think about the fact that's, you know, if we came from rodents or whatever you think, or we started out how many millions of years ago, the fact that our body's working with the sun kind of makes sense to me. So you got a whole area of medicine called circadian medicine, which essentially means that you realign your body with when the sun comes up and comes down. And now we are, you know, we got people who have sleep problems, and you know, even just realizing how cortisol is made. Cortisol is the longer acting, I guess, form of adrenaline, and another little rabbit hole to be very, very conscious of is that before we go to sleep, our bodies, when dusk happens, produce a chemical called melatonin, and this is the thing that makes us sleep night well. And the opposite of melatonin is cortisol. Okay, so when we wake up in the morning, our eyes are closed, and before technology, before lights and all these things, the color of the sky slowly changes from a black to a different color. And this is dawn. The light filters through your eyelids, okay, and that changing color stimulates cortisol, which switches off melatonin. Okay. And there is one color of the spectrum of light which is the most powerful for switching off melatonin. And I'll throw another question at you. Do you know what that is?
Red light.
Nope.
Blue light.
Absolutely. So it's no coincidence.
Screens.
Aha, you know exactly where I'm going with.
Yeah.
So it's no coincidence that the sky is blue, and our bodies have been designed to work with the sky being blue because essentially it keeps us awake.
Yeah.
And then my next question was, which you beat me to, what are the most powerful other forms of blue light we have? And you're exactly right. It's blue light. So essentially, and I've had this conversation I don't know how many times with people with insomnia who are on bags of medications which don't work for insomnia. And I'll go through this conversation and it'll be a little bit like this. Okay, what do you do before you go to bed? Well, I sit down and I watch a movie. And what do you do after your movie? Well, then I try to go to bed and I can't sleep. So then I'll get up and I'll check my messages. Incidentally, what color is Facebook? And what's the predominant color of Google and LinkedIn and Sony, Blu-ray, blue screen? Okay, so this basic fact that people with this insomnia, just insomnia can cause depression and anxiety. Just insomnia. So sometimes just treating insomnia can fix depression and anxiety. And the fact that I'm sitting in interviews with doctors and patients, and I'm hearing doctors say to these guys, oh, well, listen, you know, it's getting late now. Why don't you just go home and watch some telly and then go to bed?
Whoa.
And I'm,
pulling your hair out of bed. Oh.
So these little, I don't know, these things are just, you have to make a break.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get a little bit passionate about promoting some of these messages, which are simple messages, and collecting this information with good evidence to try and help people get out of these ruts.
Yeah, man, that's powerful. I'm so inspired by your life, mate. And I love your passion for this topic.
Absolutely.
I would actually love to dive deep into all of these areas so we can potentially make this a weekly catch up and gathering.
Yeah, pleasure. I'd love to.
We would love to hear from you guys if there's something that's jumped out for you and you really would love to learn a little bit more and understand it at a deeper level. It'd be awesome to hear your feedback. But we'll probably wrap it up for today, Dennis. I really appreciate your time, man. And
absolute pleasure.
I'm sure, and I know we're going to do many, many more of these conversations, and we'll keep it really, really interesting by going deeper. Going deeper and
absolutely.
deeper and deeper, because there's so many different branches, and you've got such an extensive wisdom and knowledge on how our physiology works and how we operate as humans. And that's something that I'm really fascinated with, is how we can really function at our most optimal prime level, what it looks like, not just to survive, but to really push it.
Thrive. Absolutely. Yeah, we're in alignment there for sure. Definitely. That's why I like hanging out with you, man.
Yeah. Thanks so much again, Dennis.
Pleasure.
Let's go. See you guys next week.